We've got some breaking news. We've just learned that Ukraine's opposition leaders have signed a deal with President Yanukovych and the European mediators that call for early elections and a new government in hopes of ending the deadly political crisis. So for now, the violence seems to have stopped, and there is at least some kind of initial agreement to resolve the crisis. Joining us now is Mikheil Saakashvili, former president of Georgia, and he's a man who knows what it's like to face down Russia's push to increase its influence in the region. President Saakashvili was the president of the Republic of Georgia, and in 2008, the Republic launched a campaign to regain control of its two breakaway provinces, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. But the Russians intervened. They sent in the tanks, and they intervened on the side of the Russian rebels who were prevented Georgia from gaining their authority back. So, President Saakashvili, thank you so much for joining us and making time in what must be a very difficult period for you. As you watch in Ukraine, is this just a repeat of what you saw in 2008 in your own neighboring country, Georgia?
Well, I mean, saying that Russia reacted to our intervention is the same thing that to say that Ukrainian police reacts to the people longing for freedom. Actually, Russia, Vladimir Putin, seems to have habits to solve his issues during Olympic Games. Last time Russia intervened to Georgia after Georgia's bid to join NATO and rapprochement with the West, it was exactly during Beijing Olympics. And now here again we have Sochi Olympics and Russia basically cracking down in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin, who gave Ukrainian government this month $2 billion cash that it badly needed because it defaulted because of corruption, mismanagement and mess in the country, primarily by president and his surroundings, also bought this right for crackdown. And immediately, it's not by accident that immediately after Yanukovych met Putin in Sochi and he got this cash, he started to crack down. And of course, it's in 2008, exactly like in 2008, Russia and his allies in Kiev claimed that they were provoked rather than they basically went in to crack down on people who want to be free and who want to live in normal, non-corrupt democracy.
Now, you know, in your situation in the last Olympics, as you point out, the Beijing Olympics, the Russians ended up sending the tanks in. Now it looks like there may be some kind of an agreement that hopefully has a peaceful resolution. But what happens if Russia doesn't get what it wants in these next elections, or if it isn't resolved in Russia's favor? Do you think Russia could send in the tanks in Ukraine like he did, like Putin did with Georgia?
It would be hard because Ukraine is 10 times more. However, Russians have already managed to do exactly the same thing that they did in Georgia by forcing regions of Ukraine to secede, and primarily their target right now is in Crimea. Already yesterday, Crimean so-called local parliament representatives, they were already claiming that they would proclaim independence in case if the Russian influence wanes in Kiev. I don't think Russians can hold Kiev. I think there is an amazing, historic, overwhelming bravery of Ukrainian people. I think it's really Soviet Union's last remnants are being dissolved now. I think Vladimir Putin clearly knows that if Ukraine is democratic, free and open European society, then Russians themselves will ask questions why Russia cannot do the same. So actually they will try their best, and they have leverage. They are already distributing. I spoke to some State Department people and they confirmed that Russia is en masse distributing passports in Ukraine, like exactly the same way like how they did it in Georgia prior to 2008 invasion, aggression and occupation of 20% of my country's territory. And indeed it's a joint fight. It's not only about Ukraine. Yesterday, a member of my party, Georgian, was killed by bullets in Kiev because people from all over the region go and sympathize and stand together by protesters, because if Ukraine breaks free, then all of us get a chance. And indeed, what is more important for Putin, who is fighting really, not only for restoration for Soviet Union, but he thinks if he does do that, he will lose power in Russia. It will be very important also for Russia.
We look at this situation and we think, well, Russia seems so secure. Putin's beloved. He's just been reelected. He's just had these successful Olympics. But do you think that the same kind of breakaway movement, protest movement that we saw in Georgia, we've seen in Ukraine, could in fact go to Russia, the heartland of Russia itself?
Well, remember last time Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the whole thing started immediately in the aftermath of Moscow Olympics. That was meant to have the height of to show the demonstrate height of Soviet power. Actually, Destalinization happened after the first major event in Soviet Union. This was youth festival when they brought people from around the world. So somehow there is this pattern in Russian history when some big international event happens, then things unfold not the way the authorities have meant them. And there are lots of similarities with Sochi and Moscow Olympics. People were not allowed it's not by accident that there are lots of arenas are half empty because most of the Russians were not allowed into the region. The oppressive regime that they have, indeed, there is a wonderful article by Russian, jailed opposition activist from Pussy Riot today in the New York Times, where she describes how it's all about, what it's all about. This is not the height of the Russian thing. The whole thing in Olympics, what the things show in Kiev certainly shows decline. With shale gas, with the economy teetering on the verge of stagnation, even with $100 oil price and the shale gas revolution in the U.S., and generally with the thing that of people all around the former Soviet bloc, they just want to live in free, non-corrupt societies. They are fed up with cronies, with corruption, with abuse of power, everything that Vladimir Putin incarnates. It's not about geopolitics. People say it's east and west of Ukraine. There is no east and west of Ukraine. There are no parts in any country, including eastern Ukraine or south Ukraine, that want to live in corrupt environment. That's one thing should be understood. And for them, Putin's Russia, that's exactly what it represents. My country tried to break free. We ended corruption. We changed things, we were punished. But now Ukraine is 10 times bigger, much harder to swallow, but still you see Vladimir Putin is so desperate he will do just his best. But my prediction is that his imperial ambitions will be buried in Kiev. I think what Ukrainian people are doing is very important for the rest of Europe, for the West. You might repeat as many times as you want, Cold War is over, and indeed it's over, but it's certainly not over for Vladimir Putin. It looks like because he is fighting this Cold War, he might again be defeated in this way, as exactly like the Soviet leaders were, and he didn't seem to grasp the main lesson why Soviet Union faded away, because they failed to modernize, they failed to give more freedom and energy and technology revolution. Exactly the same premises are happening now.
What can Europe do? What can the West do? I mean, we sit by, we would like a different outcome, but unless, I mean, you just pointed out that Russia gave Ukraine a $2 billion bailout loan. European Union is unlikely to do something like that. But is there anything Europe can do other than make some speeches and hope to negotiate, a compromise and new elections?
Well, first of all, I mean, I would say that whatever money Russia will give, it will never reach citizens of Ukraine. Ukraine has such a level of corruption, especially of president and his family, that these things will be plundered, and every Ukrainian knows that. So, in any case, once Ukraine goes to Europe, look at Poland. Poland was way poorer than Ukraine, but every citizen there is doing much, much better than an average Ukrainian. Poland has no real oligarchs, but it has more wealthy citizens. And that's what people want in Ukraine. They are not asking for cash in people in the street. They are asking for a normal way of life, for opportunities to be given to the people. But I think the European Union did right, finally, after doing so many wrong things, by expressing concern. Yesterday, they finally introduced sanctions. Well, say sanctions are going to hit. Remember, elites in Russia and Ukraine, they really don't invest in their own countries. They buy houses in the West, here in Florida or in somewhere in South France. They send their kids abroad. They put their money in banks abroad. They don't seem to believe in the future of their own country. So in those circumstances, it's with Magnitsky list on Russian officials and now with sanctions on Ukrainian officials, these things do work. The West and the United States and Europe should not underestimate their soft power, which is very, very significant. And we should not overestimate Russia's hard power when all the other factors are interplay. So in a way, I think this was the right step to take, but this was just the first step, the sanctions.
Are there any Mikheil Saakashvilis in Ukraine? If there's, you can't beat somebody with nobody. So is there, we've seen that there are a number of people who have spoken up as the rebels, as the anti-government forces, but will the country coalesce around a leader who can run against Yanukovych and who might take Ukraine in a very different direction, away from corruption, away from the oligarchs, reinvesting in the
exactly,
nation.
as you rightly pointed out, it's not about leaders. You know, it's the same kind of movement that we saw in many other capitals in the world when people assemble through Facebooks, they go out, you know, they are not there for leaders. You have 1 million in the street, and these are 1 million political activists that stand there for their own thing. So now, but I'm a constant leader of Ukrainian protest leaders. You know, I'm close friends to all of them for many years already, including Vladimir Klitschko, Petro Poroshenko, Yatsenyuk, and I can tell you that these people are already talking a lot about how Ukraine should be after. You know, last time I went to Kiev, and since then I was proclaimed persona non grata. I'm #1 on their list of people who should not be admitted into that country. But I still managed to sneak in first time, and we spent whole night with some of their opposition leaders, primarily also with Klitschko, talking about how Ukraine should be after protests, how they should reform. They want to learn from Georgia's experience. They want to learn how we tackled corruption, how we reformed the police, the tax services, and government institutions. And so these people are talking about post-epoch rather just getting rid of just another Russian crony. And I think that's exactly what Putin is afraid of. It's not about who will be the ruler of Ukraine. If Ukraine goes normal, if that's have a reformed institution, if they change it changes the whole equation, because such a big country in post-Soviet sphere can make it, then Russians will say, okay, then we can also make it. Even with small Georgia, they were already saying, well, if Georgia could, why we cannot? Now, with Ukraine, it would be impossible to, convince them otherwise. So that's really the ideological fight about Ukraine, and that's not so much about individual figures of the leaders.
Okay, what you're saying then is that the Ukrainian opposition, they look at the success Georgia's had, they look at the success Poland has had, not just in economic success, but political success and self-determination, and they want that for themselves. On the other hand, what does Georgia, when it looks at what's going on in Ukraine, what does Georgia take away from this?
Well, you know, we Georgians think that it's their fight, because if they think that if Russia can break the neck of Ukraine, then certainly it will be much easier prey. And obviously they occupy 20% of our territory, exactly the same way how they want to provoke the same things in Crimea. Well, one thing should be realized that, Putin was on a rampage. You know, in 2008, he invaded Georgia, occupied officially our part of the territory. Then he managed to help the change of government in Ukraine, which it deemed anti-Russian, and brought somebody who was supposed more pro-Russian, Yanukovych, and as he was. Then he managed to change government in Georgia through elections by propping in $2 billion of Russian money in Georgian elections in 2012. Well, he thought that he got government that he would be more obedient. At least he got rid of my government, and that was for him very decisive. So in a way, and then he intercepted Ukraine on the way to the EU agreement just the last minute. So he thought, the very moment when he was victorious, that when the United States, according to him, was not interested, when Europe was basically being squeezed out of the region, that's exactly the moment when people came in and they destroyed all his equation. These millions of people in the street. On the one hand, Putin thinks, this is a Western plot, this is CIA doing these people in the street. On the other hand, I think people in the CIA are scratching their heads how could it all happen without their prior knowledge. In fact, this is neither CIA nor Russians can really influence that. This was just genuine, people's mind. They spoke out their minds, exactly like Georgians, exactly like Moldovans, exactly like other peoples all around the place, and exactly like Russians. There's a normal instinct to live in free countries, free of corruption and cronyism. And Georgia also had economic success. We came from very poor situation. We had much higher growth rate for 9 years than Russia. We are number 8 on World Bank list of the best places to do business. Russia is 90-something, 92 or 93. So it shows you the difference. We were the least corrupt country of Europe. Ukraine and Russia were one of the most corrupt, according to the European Union. So these differences as contrast is so obvious that nobody can ignore it, despite all this propaganda that certainly Vladimir Putin is very good at to brainwashing people. But it does work in the internet age, and that's exactly what these protests do show.
I can't thank you enough, President Saakashvili. You put a real context into this. It helps us understand what's going on not only in Ukraine but the entire region. Thanks for taking time.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me.
Please keep speaking out for freedom and democracy. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
We're going to take a break and then come back and talk about what this means for Russia.